If you'd asked me a year ago, I would have told you my marriage was one of those solid, well-built structures, maybe not glamorous, but dependable. Amanda and I had been together since college, high school sweethearts that somehow survived the long haul. She had been the girl I passed notes to in AP English, the one who doodled hearts in the margins and wrote little quotes from classic novels that made my 17-year-old self think we were destined. I used to joke that Amanda fell in love with me because I gave her my last cookie at lunch. She used to laugh and say it wasn't the cookie, it was the fact I remembered she liked oatmeal raisin. That kind of history. I thought it counted for something. We'd been married 6 years. No kids yet, though we had names picked out. She was finishing her master's degree in education, while working part-time at the local library. I ran a small landscaping business with my brother, which paid the bills and then some. Our lives weren't perfect, but we were building something. Until that night. The graduation party was for Amanda's younger cousin, Beth. She was 17, bright, and going off to university in the fall. Her parents had rented out the banquet hall at the country club on the edge of town, white lights strung up on the patio, little lanterns floating in the pool, and a hired DJ who played top 40 hits with the occasional throwback. Amanda wore this flowy green dress, something light and summery that caught the breeze when she spun around. I remember watching her from across the patio, the way her hair fell around her shoulders, her laugh echoing over the music. She looked young again, the way she had in college. I liked seeing her like that. What I didn't like was the man standing with her, tall, lean, with salt and pepper hair and a sport coat that fit just a little too well. He looked familiar. When I made my way over, Amanda's expression shifted ever so slightly. That subtle flicker I might have missed if I wasn't already picking up the scent of something off. "Hey, babe," she said, looping her arm around mine. "This is Mr. Barrett, Greg. He was my history teacher senior year. He's Beth's teacher now, too." Of course. That's where I knew him from. He had been a kind of legend at the high school, young for a teacher back then, sharp, charismatic, a little too confident in the way he talked about European revolutions. Girls had crushed on him. Even Amanda had joked once about how half the senior class had a thing for him. "Nice to meet you," I said, offering my hand. He shook it firmly, confidently. "Aw, the husband," he said, smiling just wide enough to make my stomach tighten. "Amanda's mentioned you. Hard worker, right? Landscaping?" I smiled back. "That's right. Keeps me tan and tired." He chuckled, like I'd told a clever joke. But I didn't miss the way his eyes lingered on Amanda, like she was a paragraph he'd reread for the meaning between the lines. The night went on. People danced. Drinks flowed. I got caught up chatting with Beth's dad about some renovation he wanted done. When I looked around, Amanda was gone. Not just out of sight. Gone. I checked the bar, the dance floor, the patio. Her cousins hadn't seen her. One of the teenagers muttered something about seeing her near the guest wing. I tried not to jump to conclusions. Maybe she was helping someone. Maybe she needed air, maybe. The guest wing was dim and quiet, most of the doors shut. I walked slowly, footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. I wasn't sure what I expected to find. I certainly didn't expect to hear her laugh again, this time softer, more intimate, like it had been whispered against someone's ear. It came from the last room on the left. I stopped outside the door. My heart was hammering. My hand hovered over the knob. And then I heard her voice. "Are you sure no one saw us?" A male voice replied, smooth, composed, unmistakable. "They're drunk. No one's paying attention." Silence. Then the faint rustle of movement. A low gasp. A muffled sound that was absolutely Amanda. I didn't open the door. I stood there. I listened. I memorized every second like it was a recording I'd never be able to erase. I didn't burst in, didn't scream. My whole body went cold and still, like I'd stepped outside of time. When I walked away, I felt like I left my heartbeat behind that door. I drove home alone. She texted me an hour later, asking where I'd gone. I told her I had a headache. She said she was getting a ride with Beth's older brother. She didn't mention Mr. Barrett. She didn't have to. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, and replayed everything. Her laugh, the dress, his hand on her arm. Her voice behind that door. The way she never told me he'd be there. The way she'd looked at him. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a drunken lapse in judgment. It was premeditated. And suddenly, all those years, all those notes in the margins, they meant nothing. The morning after the party, Amanda acted like nothing had changed. She hummed in the kitchen while she made coffee, scrolled her phone at the counter like any other Sunday. I watched her from the doorway, the steam rising from her mug, her bare shoulder peeking out from her sleep shirt, the one I bought her for our 3rd anniversary. Everything looked normal, but nothing felt right. It was strange how much one night could warp everything. She offered me a cup like she always did. I declined. That was the first crack. "Are you okay?" she asked, furrowing her brow. "You've been quiet." "Just tired," I said. It was true. I hadn't slept. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her walking into that room with him. I heard her voice. That whisper. That laugh. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed to know more. I needed to understand how deep it went, how far she'd already drifted. If it was just a mistake, a one-time thing, I didn't know what I'd do. But if it wasn't, over the next few weeks, I became a shadow in my own life. I started watching her. Not in the obsessive, creepy way you hear about in movies. Just quietly noticing the inconsistencies. The way she smiled at her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. How she suddenly had more study sessions with classmates I'd never heard her mention before. How she always left her phone face down on the table. I started asking questions. Casual ones. Who are you meeting up with tonight? What are you working on so late? She always had answers, rehearsed ones, too perfect to believe. I knew Amanda too well. I could hear the lie in her voice. One night, I pretended to fall asleep early. Around 10, she told me she was heading out to help a classmate with a group project. She kissed my forehead like it was a ritual, like her lips could erase betrayal. I waited 10 minutes, then got in my truck. I didn't have to drive far. Her car was parked near the university annex building, the one that stayed open late for students. But she wasn't inside. She was outside, leaning against the passenger door of a sleek, unfamiliar car. The streetlight above her flickered, casting flashes of amber light on her face. She was laughing again. And there he was. Greg Barrett. Mr. History with his hands in his pockets, body angled toward her like a man who already knew he'd won. I stayed in my truck, engine off, watching from across the street. I saw him brush her hair back from her face. I saw her lean into the touch. He kissed her. She let him. Not a peck. Not a drunk, clumsy mistake. It was slow, practiced. Intimate. I didn't take pictures. I didn't pull out my phone. That would have made it feel like evidence. Like I needed proof. I already knew the truth. It was written all over her body. She came home around midnight. I was sitting in the living room, lights off, just the blue glow of the television humming in the background. She jumped a little when she saw me. "Hey, couldn't sleep?" she asked, setting her bag down carefully by the door. "No," I said. "You get the project done?" Her eyes flinched for just a second. "Yeah. Took longer than I thought." I nodded. You smell like cigarettes. Oh, some guy outside was smoking. Probably drifted. I stared at her for a long time. The lies were so smooth now. Effortless. And I realized I wasn't even angry. Not yet. I was sad. So deeply, achingly sad. Because I still loved her. Even after everything. I didn't want this story to be ours. I didn't want the girl who wore my class ring to be the one sneaking off with an old teacher. A few nights later, I decided to test her. I invited her out. A spontaneous date. Dinner at our favorite Italian place. The one where she once spilled wine on her dress and laughed so hard she made the whole restaurant smile. She hesitated. Said she had reading to do. I insisted. Just one night, I said. Let's make time for each other. She finally agreed. At the restaurant, she barely touched her pasta. She kept checking her phone. When I reached out across the table, she gave me her hand, but it felt like holding air. Cold. Disconnected. I miss us, I said. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I'm just tired. School's been a lot lately. That's when I asked her, Are you seeing someone else? She blinked, looked down at her plate. Why would you ask that? It's a simple question. She didn't answer right away. She just picked up her wine glass, took a slow sip, and said, I'm not ready to talk about this. Not. No. Not even a protest. Just avoidance. That night, we drove home in silence. And in that silence, I heard the answer clearer than any spoken word. She wasn't mine anymore. Not really. But I wasn't ready to let go. Not until I understood why. Not until I confronted the man who'd scribbled himself into the margins of my marriage like he belonged there. I wasn't sure what I expected when I knocked on Greg Barrett's office door that Friday afternoon. Maybe a smug smirk. Maybe denial. Or some twisted defense about love transcending boundaries. What I didn't expect was how calm I felt. The university hallway was mostly empty. Students either home for the weekend or packing for summer programs. Amanda's graduation was just 2 weeks away. That was the excuse she'd given me for her frequent visits to campus. Final papers, last seminars, wrap-up meetings. Lies. The door opened a crack, then wider. He looked surprised to see me. His mouth curled halfway into a polite smile before his expression froze. Can I help you? You know who I am, I said. He nodded slowly. Yes, Amanda's husband. We stood there for a beat. Then he stepped aside. Come in. His office was as pretentious as I imagined. Framed degrees, dusty shelves packed with thick books, a small espresso machine humming in the corner. A quote about history and memory etched into a plaque above his desk. I didn't sit down. I'm not here to fight, I said. But I want to know why. You knew she was married. You knew I existed. Why her? Greg exhaled slowly, folding his hands on the desk like he was prepping for a lecture. I didn't plan it. We talked after class. She was curious, passionate. She reminded me of myself once. I almost laughed. She's not a thesis project, I said. She's a person. She's my wife. He flinched at that, just slightly. Do you love her? I asked. He didn't answer right away. It's complicated. No, it's really not. He leaned back in his chair, expression softening. You have to understand, people grow. Sometimes they outgrow each other. Amanda said you were a good man. Loyal. Steady. But she felt stuck. That hit harder than I expected. Stuck. That's what I'd become to her. A fixture. A memory of who she used to be, not who she wanted to become. You know what's funny? I said, walking slowly around his office. She used to say I was her anchor. That I kept her grounded when life got chaotic. He said nothing. And now, she's just floating somewhere else. With you. I didn't punch him. Didn't yell. I just turned and left, the echo of my footsteps bouncing off the tile floor. When I got home, Amanda was waiting at the kitchen table. She looked up from her phone, startled to see me so early. "We need to talk," I said. She nodded, her eyes already brimming with guilt. "I went to see him." Her lips parted. "Why would you?" "Because I needed to hear it from him. Because I needed to see for myself if there was something real between you two. And you know what? I'm not even angry anymore." Her eyes welled. "I never meant to hurt you. But you did." I sat across from her, resting my arms on the table. "How long?" She didn't lie. "Since December. Just after winter break." 6 months. Half a year of half-truths and hidden phone calls and secret rendezvous in lecture halls and borrowed offices. "I kept hoping it would fizzle out," she said. "That it was just infatuation. But I didn't want to stop." "Why?" Her voice cracked. "Because with him, I felt seen again. Not as your wife. Not as the future mom or the support system. Just as me." I sat in silence. I'd spent years trying to build a life with her. We shared everything: laughs, dreams, debts, playlists, even toothbrushes when we forgot to pack extra. And yet, somehow, I'd missed this void in her. Or maybe I just thought love was enough to fill it. "I never stopped loving you," she whispered. "Maybe not," I said. "But you stopped choosing me." That was the line that broke her. Her shoulders collapsed inward as she started to cry. Not the loud, dramatic sobs of apology. Just the quiet kind. The kind that told me she finally understood. "I'm not staying," I said. "I've already talked to a lawyer." She nodded. "I'll leave. I won't fight you. I'm not doing this out of spite. I can't live with someone who saw our life as a chapter to rewrite." We didn't fight. We didn't scream. We didn't even blame. She moved out 2 days later. Her parents came with her to pack, and I watched from the porch as she loaded her things into their car. She looked back once. I didn't wave. It's been 7 months. She graduated, I heard. Moved to a new city. Took a job teaching, of all things, social studies at a high school. Irony's got a wicked sense of humor. I stayed. Expanded the landscaping business. Took up journaling, believe it or not. Therapy in ink. Turns out, writing helps more than I ever expected. Some nights, I still wonder if she thinks about me. If she regrets it. Or if, in her world, I've become just a footnote in the story she tells about becoming who she was meant to be. But I've stopped asking why. Some betrayals don't come with clean explanations. Sometimes, people just drift into versions of themselves that no longer match the life you built together. That night at the graduation party was the end of our story. She just hadn't told me yet. But I know now. And sometimes, closure isn't a door slamming shut. Sometimes, it's just walking away from a room where the lights burned out long ago.